Thank you for your time for this interview. Can you tell us about the meeting today? What was discussed? Why it is so important? I guess this is the first high-level meeting where the two ambassadors were there after the historic state visit.
Yes, within days of our two leaders meeting, we were followed up this last couple of days with the high-level meeting where Ministry of External Affairs from India and 12 different departments and ministries, including Narcotics Control Bureau, Director General Pradhan, Department of Revenue Intelligence, Ministries of Health, Family Welfare, but also Ayush, and several others were represented. From United States side, of course, we had State Department engaged, we had FDA, DEA, and so many of those individuals that work in New Delhi were also here. So this was a very important high-level meeting, which both of the ambassadors were able to convene and start. We had a lot of conversations, both from the leadership of the Ministry of External Affairs, which is so important,
Right.
Ambassador Sandhu, as well as Ambassador Garcetti. The conversations have really been about moving forward the joint U.S.-India relationship that was captured as part of the Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. And what we really have worked on over the last couple of days is the three pillars. One is the counter narcotics and the work to do to dismantle the networks of traffickers and producers of illicit drugs. The second one is to work on drug demand reduction and harm reduction. That includes looking at not only how do we help people who are suffering from addiction, but prevent addiction in the first place, and at the same time work on things like workforce shortages. Know that the United States is standing at a cliff where we expect to have more than 30,000 healthcare worker shortages in the next few years. And it's important that we look at every aspect of people-to-people exchange to be able to enhance that with our partners in India. And the third pillar really is ensuring that there is a pharmaceutical supply chain and a thriving pharmaceutical industry. And when we do all of these pillars, it creates the it creates the framework for the 21st century between the two countries that poses and postures the two nations as global leaders in this area. And it's really important because at a time when both in the United States, 100,000 Americans are perishing a year, but also this disease and this issue is not something that has not affected India either. It's important that two countries work for the betterment of both nations, but also for the global benefit. It is in line with where India also participated in the recent July 7th meeting that Secretary of State Blinken convened of the Global Coalition Against Synthetic Drugs across. And India, we were so honored to have India as a participation nation. More than 80 nations and 11 international organizations participated in that. And we really appreciate India's leadership as well in becoming that global leader, not only for becoming the pharmacy of the world, but also in terms of disrupting illicit trafficking of drugs and production, and making sure that we're all working together when it comes to diseases like addiction to address it and prevent it.
Coming to the 3 points one by one on the counter narcotics, right? How can India and US decided to collaborate to further on this system?
It's a very important collaboration. It's one that India clearly sees at the junction of counter narcotics and counterterrorism / counter extremism. These things are tied in various parts of the world. So it's very important whether we are exchanging information, intelligence, or other ways to partner with both our law enforcement and other agencies as well as India's law enforcement. That's one of the reasons that the Director General Pradhan was so instrumental in both convening it, but also then leading various numbers of various agencies in India, along with partners of parallel agencies in the United States.
And on the demand reduction and prevention, you said the shortage of people here. Do you expect the trained manpower coming from India to help you out?
I think definitely there's an important role here when we look at shortage of workforce. which is clearly there. We're doing a lot here. We're doing loan repayment programs, we're doing fellowships and scholarships, but clearly we have to look at every tool in the toolbox to address this because this is directly related to life and death when we don't have enough workforce. So it's critical that we look at every pathway to expand our workforce, but then also look at technology. Telehealth is another way. We have to look at how do we harmonize curriculum. How can the training be harmonized between two countries of folks like social workers and addiction counselors, as well as physicians and doctors. So it's important to look at all of those things that the sooner we harmonize training, then we can also look at how do we do people-to-people exchange as well.
So first step is going to be training.
Yeah, I mean, the important piece would be that to make sure that our trainings are similar, and we're already working on those things with our State Department, and we are looking at where we understand the role of these important areas like social work, like addiction counseling, and others. And as we harmonize training, I think it will open up pathways for people to be able to help each other. And I can tell you that in the United States, there is a need, there is a shortage of workforce.
And how do you ensure that India continues to be the pharma capital and the supply chain remains intact? Because a lot of ingredients comes from, it's not in India's hand, right?
Yeah, so a lot of the important pieces, I think what we have seen with China, as we increase our demand for the pharmaceutical products out of China, we've also seen a growth of the illicit chemical industry in China. And because today it is a major sort of producer of these precursor chemicals that contribute to the production of fentanyl, production of other illicit synthetic drugs. We want to, all of us, it's in our interest to not repeat that mistake. So India has an interest in making sure that that diversion control happens, and it has thriving pharmaceutical industry that it becomes obviously is competing, and the Americans are able to take benefit out of that as India is, obviously having a pharmaceutical supply for so many other countries. But part of that is working with agencies like the FDA, like DEA and others to ensure that that integrity is there.
Coming to the India relationship post Modi visit, how do you see now a month, it was about a month, right? 21st, 22nd, it happened. A month later, how do you see the relationship has shaped up now? How, if you look back and see, what are the more important features of this visit?
Yeah, of course, there were so many historic agreements that happened as part of this visit. This was, as described by our ambassadors, two ambassadors said this is the most historic visit and certainly a really important landmark visit, where whether it's defense, it's technology, it's people-to-people exchange, it's health, various sectors that were discussed and agreed upon. We are making significant progress in moving that forward. I think this visit was not only significant, but it will be remembered as one that was historic in nature and really turned the page in terms of having both countries work at a level unprecedented in history.
And where do you think it goes from here? This
I think it's upon the two governments now to take that and execute on the agreements of our leaders. And this is exactly why this meeting today and yesterday happened within days of the state visit, to demonstrate the progress that is being made and the seriousness with which the two governments take the commitment of our leaders.
Now, I wanted to ask you about how serious the situation of synthetic drugs among the youths in India is, since you have been leading the fight against in the US. What are the lessons India can learn or implement the best practices from the US?
Yeah, so first of all, it's important to note that no matter where you are in the world, you are at risk of synthetic drugs. Whether it's fentanyl, whether it's methamphetamine, whether it's ketamine, captagon, these chemicals, you can make an enormous amount of chemicals sitting in a laboratory, and you don't need farm, field, crops, or fertilizers for that. So it's clearly a clear danger for so many people across the globe. Now, we also see that when the populations are using organic drugs like heroin,
Right.
ganja, and others, then it translates and sort of evolves into synthetic drugs over time because they're just more profitable to the traffickers and those who are trying to make money off the suffering of people. That's where it is definitely an issue. It is important for us to work together as two nations to look at, make sure that these drugs are not coming into as a destination country, as an origin country, or as a transit country. And that's kind of where we focus on to make sure that India has a robust diversion control, successful and thriving pharmaceutical industry, but also at the same time, people who are suffering from addiction as a disease, they're getting the help they need. And there's a lot of progress that has happened in India. There's a lot of progress that is currently happening in the United States in terms of advancing treatment. And therefore, that's why it's important that two countries work with each other, share resources with each
Right.
other, and move the ball forward.
One last question. Indian Americans in this country are also impacted by this, in particular the youth. What do you tell the youths and also their parents? Because
Yeah. First of all, I'll say this. Just this week, on Tuesday, the Vice President Harris, convened a roundtable with 8 state attorneys general of the various states, and I moderated that conversation. Right before she did that, she met with parents of those youth who had passed away from overdose, one of which was an Indian American. And this is something that is close to her. This is something that she talked about as a public health crisis and why it's important for Indian Americans in this country and all of the population in this country to understand that this crisis doesn't care if you are living in rural or urban population, if you are rich or poor, brown, black, or white. It doesn't care. It will affect everybody. So it's very important, especially that we have conversation around dinner table with our children. We understand the early signs that there may be something wrong. For example, if the social behavior has changed for our kids, or if academic performance has changed, or others. So the bottom line, I think, is important to understand is that um, adolescents and teens, it's important to recognize when they're having challenges in life like most of us have, and be supportive, be available, and make sure they can ask for help. In that spirit, the Surgeon General and I have put out an op-ed just last week in USA Today that talks about the importance of mental health and addiction and social isolation amongst youth, and what can families do to help. We've also put out from the White House a campaign for the youth called realdealonfentanyl.com. That's realdealonfentanyl.com. And we've partnered with the Ad Council to send two main messages to the youth in our country. One, fentanyl is dangerous. It can be in any pills that are not coming from doctor's office or from a pharmacy. So watch out. The likelihood of you dying from taking such a pill is 6 out of 10. That means worse than playing Russian roulette with your life. Two, make sure you have naloxone or Narcan available, because it may be not for you. It may be for someone else where you are, in your school, at a party, in your home, or at a neighbor.
right.
So that messages. And that campaign has already got 1.7 billion impressions. So we've had a very wide spread of that campaign, and it's important. The way we're doing it, it is on social media. So we are using trusted messengers, leaders, to talk to the youth in their own language, to let them know the dangers of fentanyl and the importance of carrying the antidote, which is naloxone or a Narcan, as it's called, if you are overdosing from a drug like that.